The Praise of Folly, Author's Preface, Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam, to his friend Thomas More. Greetings. Recently, when I was on my way from Italy to England, instead of wasting all the time I had to spend on horseback in idle chatter and empty gossip, I tried occasionally to think over some of the things we have studied together, and to call to mind the conversation of my most learned and agreeable friends from whom I was then separated. Among those friends, you, my dear Moore, were the first whose name occurred to me, since I find just as much pleasure in thinking of you when we are apart as I do in your company when we are together. And upon my soul, nothing in life has ever brought me more pleasure than your friendship. Well, since I felt I must be doing something, and the circumstances were hardly proper for serious study, I thought I might occupy myself with the praise of folly. What put such a notion in my mind, you may ask? My first hint came from your family name of More, which is just as close to Moria, the Greek word for folly, as you are remote from the thing itself. In fact, everyone agrees that you're as far removed from it as possible. Besides, I had a suspicion that this joke would be agreeable to you, because you particularly enjoy jests of this sort. That is, if I don't flatter myself, jests seasoned with a touch of learning and a dash of wit. For that matter, you enjoy playing the role of Democritus in all the common business of life. Though, as a result of your searching and original mind, you're bound to hold opinions very different from those of common men, yet by virtue of your warm and sincere manner, you can get along with all sorts of people at any time of day, and actually enjoy doing so. Will you then accept this little declamationlet of mine as the keepsake of a friend and take it under your protection? For now that is dedicated to you, it is properly yours, not mine. I don't doubt that there will be busybodies to condemn the book, some saying that it's composed of trifles too silly to befit a theologian's dignity, others declaring that it's too sharp of tooth to accord with the modest behavior of a Christian. They will thunder out comparisons with the old comedy and the satires of Lucian. They will say I snap and slash at everyone like a mad dog. Well, will the people who are offended by the frivolity of the argument and the absurdity of the jokes kindly reflect that I'm not setting the style here? The same thing has been done before, again and again, by famous authors of the past. It was centuries ago that Homer toyed with his war between the frogs and the mice, Virgil with his gnat and his garlic salad, Ovid with his nut. Polycrates wrote in praise of Busiris the tyrant, and Isocrates, though no friend to Polycrates, did the same thing. Glaucon spoke up for injustice. Favorinus praised Thersites and the quartan ague. Synesius had words to say in favor of baldness, and Lucian wrote panegyrics on a fly and a parasite. Seneca ridiculed Claudius in his pumpkinification. Plutarch wrote a dialogue in which Ulysses disputed with a hog. Gryllus, both Lucian and Apuleius, wrote about life as seen by an ass, and some anonymous author wrote the last will and testament of a hog named Grunius Coracoda, of which St. Jerome preserved a recollection. If it makes them any happier, let the complainers imagine that I spent my travel time playing chess or riding on a hobby horse. Every other profession is entitled to a bit of leisure. What's so terrible if scholars take a little time off for play, especially if their foolery leads to something slightly more serious? Some jokes can be managed in such a way that a reader who isn't altogether thick of nose can profit by them. More, perhaps, than from the pompous formal arguments of certain people we know. I have in mind some paltry fellow who patches up an oration in praise of rhetoric or philosophy, or another supple rascal who's set on flattering his prince, or some agitator who wants to rouse up everyone to go off and fight the Turk. There are fools who pretend to predict the future and others who strain to settle some subtle and difficult point that doesn't matter a fraction of a trifle either way. Just as it's the height of triviality to treat serious matters in a trivial way, so there's nothing more delightful than finding that some trifles have been managed so that they turn out far from trivial. About my own performance, it's not me to judge, but unless I'm completely misled by self-love, my praise of folly hasn't been performed altogether foolishly. Now let me answer those cavillers who object to what they call biting satire. Good wits have always been allowed the liberty to exercise their high spirits on the common life of men, and without rebuke, as long as their sport doesn't become savagery. That's why I'm so impressed by the delicacy of modern ears, which can scarcely endure anything but formal titles of honor. You can even find some religious men so topsy-turvy in their values that they listen more complacently to real blasphemies against Christ than to the mildest of jokes about the Pope or the local prince, especially if the joke might touch them in the pocketbook. But if someone attacks the vices of humankind without mentioning any individual by name, is he harming people, or rather teaching them, admonishing them? Consider in addition on how many scores I attack my own self. Besides, when men of every different sort are censured, it's clear that vice in general is the target, not a particular person. So if anyone complains that he's been harmed, it's either his conscience that accuses him or his guilt. St. Jerome wrote in this vein much more freely and bitterly, sometimes not even suppressing personal names. I have not only avoided naming people, but have softened my style so that any intelligent reader will understand my intention was to divert, not to insult. Unlike Juvenal, I made no effort to rake in the sewer of hidden crimes. My aim was to ridicule absurdities, not to catalogue sins. And if there's someone who can't be calmed by these reflections, let him recall that it's a kind of compliment to be attacked by folly. Let him recall when I chose her as my spokesperson. I was bound to observe the proprieties of her character. But why do I say all these things to you, who are so skilled an advocate, that even in causes that aren't the best you can put up the best defense? Farewell, most learned more, and defend your folly faithfully. From the country, June 9th, 1510.